There was a number of years after the death of the Prophet when Imam Ali had important spiritual responsibility for the community, but did not have any political power. And during this time, he focused on training people in understanding the Quran, in memorizing the Quran, training them in their life of prayer and devotion to God. We can say that he was the spiritual guide of people rather than one who had political power. Now, this period of some years of political powerlessness was also experienced in the lives of Imam Hassan and of Imam Husayn. And we know that in that period of time between the mortal wound that Ali received and his death, he designated his son Hassan as the next Imam after him. But of course, the opposition that was there to Ali in his leadership of the community continued on after his death. This opposition to the leadership of the Ahl al-Bayt was of course led by Muawiyah on behalf of the Umayyads based in Damascus. And it was clear that Muawiyah thought that he should now take on the leadership of the community. Now, Muawiyah had assembled a very strong army based in Syria. This was an army that was already proven, not only in Syria, but also in Egypt. If Hassan had stood his ground and demanded that his was the right to be the leadership of the community after the death of Ali, then there would have been colossal fighting. There would have been colossal loss of life. And Hassan was conscious that many of the young in faith Muslim community at this time didn't really have a very developed and strong faith, and therefore it was much more important that he should concentrate on the inner development of people rather than to struggle for political power. So these two factors, the need to build up the inner spiritual discipline and the fact that Muawiyah had such a powerful army that it could have resulted in massive loss of life, meant that Imam Hassan came to an agreement with Muawiyah. And the agreement was that Hassan would withdraw from any kind of political leadership, would concentrate on spiritual guidance and spiritual leadership amongst those who would come to him in Medina, and that Muawiyah would take on a political role within the community, but that after that, at the death of Muawiyah, the matter should be resolved by a conference, by a consensus-seeking meeting of the elders of the community. So in this way, a treaty was entered into between Hassan and Muawiyah. Now, during the remaining years of his life, Imam Hassan was living in Medina, and he was training the spiritual nature of the people who were coming to him to seek his guidance. One of the important lessons that he taught was about patience. He called it waiting upon God. It is God who will decide when the moment is right that you should take a move. it is God who tests our patience, that we do not always receive everything that we think we should have all at the same time. So therefore, patience, waiting upon God, is an important part of the spiritual life. During this time, Imam Husayn spoke a good deal about death. He said on one occasion, "Death is inevitable. We are to engage with the world, but to refrain from worldly ambition." It is as though some people think that they're going to live forever and never be held accountable for their life. However, Imam Husayn tells us death is inevitable. Therefore, judgment is inevitable for each one of us. So our concern should not be about building up worldly ambitions, becoming wealthy and powerful in this life. Instead, we should be concentrating on those higher things, our relationship with God, building up the goodness of our family and of the community. Husayn always keeps telling people to seek the company of wise men and women. Why? Because the company that we keep shapes our very character. It shapes our outlook. It shapes the way that we think, the way that we act. So if we seek pious, wise company, then that piety and wisdom will also rub off and will shape the way that we grow and aspire as servants of God, as human beings living a human life here on earth. So seek the company of wisdom and piety, because then you will grow in those two virtues, says Imam Husayn. One of the remarkable things about Imam Husayn was his relationship with money. He tells people, you are to keep just that which you need, but to give away excess wealth. Don't be building it up and hoarding it. And there are reports that during his life, he would give away money, he would divide his wealth and his treasure and give it to different people so that his own teaching would be lived out in his own life too. And then, of course, when Imam Husayn died, it was the time for Husayn to take over the leadership of the community. But again, he remains true to that treaty which Husayn had entered into. And so he too lives a period of time without political power, just serving the spiritual needs of the community in Medina. We have some very profound sayings of Imam Husayn during this period. For example, he says, "Be steadfast and firm in the way towards what is right, even if your journey is full of pain and challenges." He knows very well that this journey is not going to be an easy one, and yet we are to keep steadfast on what is right, keeping on the path of God, enduring to the very end. Again, he says, "By God, I will never surrender to my enemies like a humiliated person, and I will never pledge allegiance to them like slaves." Remember that during this period he is aware that Muawiyah is growing in strength, that he is scheming against Husayn to make sure that the leadership of the community remains in the hands of the Umayyads. He's not made a move yet, but that's already part of his scheming and planning. And therefore it's clear that Imam Husayn will never give in to that kind of tyranny even before the challenge is made. Again, on another occasion, he is reported to have said, "To me, death for the sake of what is right is nothing but happiness, and living under tyrants, nothing but living in hell." So we can see that his whole life is focused, that this life is not all there is. And a life of luxury under tyranny has no meaning and no joy in it at all, but rather he is prepared to take a stand for justice even at the cost of his life. And so we're seeing a foretaste of the way in which the story is later going to develop. Another saying which is reported from Imam Husayn at this time is again about generosity. This becomes one of the hallmarks of the Ahlul Bayt. And he says, the greatest generosity is to give to the person who is not expecting to receive from you. Now, giving to someone who thinks that they have a right to receive from you, or giving to someone who thinks that they expect to receive from you because of their closeness, their kinship, or whatever, well, that's one thing. But the generosity of the Imam is to touch the inner heart of the person who thinks that he will never receive anything in the way of goodness or a gift from the Imam. And in this way, the gift touches the very depths of the heart of the individual and turns him in a profound way toward God in thanksgiving. Another of the characteristics that we see in the members of the Ahlul Bayt is their concern for the poor, their concern for those who are in need. So again, Imam Husayn is reported to have said, "God will help the person who cares about other people's needs, both in this world and in the hereafter." So by doing what is right and caring for the poor and needy in this society, this will not go unnoticed by God, who will indeed remember that and respond by caring for the needs of that person, both in this life and in the hereafter. One final saying which Imam Husayn leaves with us is to tell us to beware of those people whose great concern is the sins of other people while they neglect their own sins. It calls us to a spirit of self-reflection, first of all, to make our peace with God, to remember our own status, our own sinfulness before God, and to seek the mercy and forgiveness, rather than be looking at other people, trying to find fault with them, instead of repairing our relationship, both with God and with other people. So Husayn is always calling on the best from people, trying to touch the goodness of their hearts, and in this way to lead them in that godly path that will lead them to flourish in this life and eventually to come to paradise.